725.
When you see news happen, call us at 280-9740. In Ames, 294-4333 or toll-free 1-800-858-5555. This is 5 TV.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joan Lunden. It is Monday, January the 26th.
And I'm Charlie Gibson, down here for David Hartman for a few days. All hail the New York Giants. The Giants, the champs. I think everybody knows that. This is sort of a continuation of the post-game show this morning. The telecasts go on forever on the Super Bowl, but the Giants do win. The East Coast wins the Super Bowl, but the East Coast loses in the weather picture. The East Coast being battered by snow. This is a live picture of the Capitol down in Washington. It has been snowing in Washington now for 24 straight hours after last week's storm.
And it's snowing outside here as well?
Yep. Spencer will have all the weather in a few minutes.
Right now, we are going to focus on what's happening in Beirut this morning. By now, you have heard that 3 more Americans were taken hostage in Beirut over the weekend. Does it mean a new outbreak of violence against Americans in the Middle East? Is it in any way related to the failed arms deal with Iran? We will talk with former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and with the Reverend Benjamin Weir, who was once a hostage himself, of course. Yeah.
Also this morning, we sent Lynn Swann, the MVP in Super Bowl X, yesterday's game in Pasadena. And he's going to have a lot of the hoopla and the dancing and the celebration that went on afterwards. Also, Gene Cernan, the former astronaut, is joining our Good Morning America family today, and he'll be with us every Monday to show us how science and technology have changed our world and us, and what new things will be coming into our lives. A new feature we're going to call New Stuff in Science.
New Stuff in Science.
Very important title for it.
Right now, though, it's a minute after. Bill O'Reilly has the news for us. Bill, good morning.
Hi, Joan. Hi, Charlie. And good morning, everybody. Muslim extremists in Lebanon are threatening to kill one of 4 people taken hostage on Saturday unless West Germany releases a suspected hijacker of TWA Flight 847. 3 Americans, Jesse Turner, Robert Polhill, and Alan Steen, and an Indian-born U.S. resident, M. Singh, are all professors at Beirut University College. Several Beirut schools canceled classes today to protest those abductions. And here in Washington, President Reagan is said to be deeply concerned about the latest kidnappings. More from John McWethy.
The president, who spent much of his weekend polishing his State of the Union address, returned from Camp David without comment on the latest kidnappings. On This Week with David Brinkley, however, those outside the administration were saying to do nothing is to invite more of the same.
So most terrorist groups and most state sponsors of terrorism around the world still believe that they can safely take Americans hostage and they can gain from it.
The new chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee says some kind of retaliation would help.
If we could find out who's responsible, if it's a government, I think we ought to exert tremendous sanctions, and if it occurs again and again, then one could use military action.
Henry Kissinger also says military retaliation is an option that should be considered and used. Finding the right target should not be that tough.
And I just don't believe that this can be so difficult, since journalists seem to be able to get into a taxi in Beirut and find some of these headquarters.
For an administration that is struggling to divert attention from the Iran arms scandal, finding a way to strike out at terrorists and the countries that support them has tremendous appeal. How to do it without getting the hostages killed in the process is a major complication. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
The wives of all 4 professors witnessed the kidnappings, and 2 of them say their husbands need medicine. Robert Polhill suffers from diabetes, and M. Singh needs medication for low blood pressure. Also this morning, West Germany's Chancellor Helmut Kohl is celebrating another election victory. Kohl and his Christian Democratic Alliance were the winners in yesterday's parliamentary elections, but they came away with a reduced majority. And in Manila, some 10,000 leftists marched near the presidential palace today, where armed forces last week killed 12 demonstrators. More than 1,000 soldiers and riot police were on hand, and some cabinet members stood by in an effort to prevent even more violence. Well, parts of the Northeast are getting what looks like a weather videotape replay as the snowstorm moves along the coast. Just like last week, heavy snow here in Washington has given thousands of federal workers the day off, and kids too. And in New York, more snow is leading to even more delays for commuters. And the New York Giants are feeling pretty good, and so are their fans as they celebrate a Super Bowl victory. Giants fans jam New York City area bars to watch their heroes beat the Denver Broncos 39-20 in Super Bowl 21. Tim Brandt was at the game, and he has the details now from L.A.
Operate from the spread formation.
Both clubs were hot early in the ball game. The Broncos' first possession, first quarter, John Elway hit Mark Jackson with a big third down play which set up Rich Carlos' field goal. The Giants came right back. Phil Simms hit Zeke Mowat on a post pattern. Simms was 6 for 6 on that drive. John Elway's just as hot. He hit his next 4 passes, which set up a quarterback draw for a touchdown and a 10-7 Denver lead. The 17 points scored in that quarter tied a Super Bowl record. The Giants defense had a goal line stand, then a safety when George Martin sacked John Elway in the end zone. The biggest play of the ball game came on 4th and 1 near midfield. The Giants decided not to punt. They shifted out of punt formation to go for the first with quarterback Jeff Rutledge, and the gamble paid off. First down, Giants. New York went on to gain the lead. They would not relinquish. Simms, who was nearly perfect, hit Mark Bavaro on the post pattern. But the clincher came on the flea flicker with 24 seconds left in the third quarter. Simms to Morris and back to Simms, who found a wide open Phil McConkey for a 45-yard gain to the 1-yard line. That set up a Joe Morris touchdown.
I thought the flea flicker just ended the game. When I hit him down the 1, I thought that was the game. I said, that's it. We've won this damn thing. And I just thought it was a difference, and it was a great call.
New York had gained 163 yards in the third quarter to just 2 for Denver. The fourth quarter was showtime. McConkey scored on a tip pass that was intended for Bavaro. 33-10 New York. It was all Giants until near the end of the game. John Elway threw this touchdown pass to Vance Johnson, who made a spectacular catch. The scoring was done. The Giants had won, and the Super Bowl ended 39-20 New York. Certainly one of the more interesting Super Bowls, and if you haven't had enough football, the Pro Bowl is next week right here on ABC. Bill?
Okay, Tim, thanks a lot. A top Reagan administration official says the fast decline of the dollar overseas may not be as bad as it seems. Stephen Ogg has details in this morning's economic report.
Good morning. Treasury Secretary James Baker says there could indeed be problems if the price of the dollar falls too far, though he says the drop so far has been orderly and reasonable. Baker says too great a drop could result in more inflation and make it difficult to finance the federal deficit if foreigners stop investing in U.S. government bonds. In fact, a former government economic and trade official, Robert Hormats, who's now an investment banker, says it's a real risk that foreigners may stop buying government paper. This at a time when the Treasury has a big refunding operation coming up.
And if the dollar is in the midst of a decline during that funding, I suspect a lot of foreign investors are simply going to hold back, not buy U.S. Treasury bonds, and then we will see long-term and medium-term interest rates go up. That hurts our recovery.
Hormats appeared on the ABC program Business World. Finally, the International Trade Commission says imports continue to take over the domestic shoe business. During the third quarter of last year, domestic production fell 15%, imports rose 8%. Result, imports now account for 81% of the shoes sold in this country. Clearly, the domestic industry wants Congress to lace into those shoe imports. The economy this morning.
Once again, the dollar is falling against foreign currencies. Overseas, the dollar is down against the Japanese yen. In Europe, the dollar is down against the West German mark, the French franc, and the British pound. In London, the morning gold fixing was up 45 cents an ounce from Friday's close in New York. Taking a look ahead at some of the events coming up on today's news calendar, President Reagan will be interviewed today by the Tower Commission, which is investigating the national security's role in the Iran-Contra affair. The White House says the president's comments will not be released. Islamic leaders gathered today in Kuwait for a summit conference. Iran is boycotting the meeting because Kuwait backs Iraq in the Gulf War with Iran. Some 50,000 school children take part in a flag-raising ceremony near Cape Canaveral to honor the 7 Challenger astronauts who died nearly a year ago. And this evening on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, a look at the controversy surrounding surrogate motherhood. That is the news at 7. Coming up at 7:30, the families of the latest Lebanon kidnapping victims talk about Saturday's abductions. Joan and Spencer, back to you.
Thank you, Bill. And right now it's 8 minutes after, and the weather here on the East Coast, boy, it really stinks.
This is
Looked
brutal.
gorgeous out at the game last night.
Yeah, I wish we could all move out there.
This is brutal, though.
This is our second big snowstorm in 5 days. I'm thinking about taking a vacation until the start of spring.
Oh, thanks a lot.
This is almost unbearable. We'll start with a look at the jet stream. The position here bringing a flow of moisture off the Pacific, so it's a little wet up in the northwestern corner of the nation. Great weather in the southwest. That'll be your best bet for weather today. Pleasant, clear skies here. The same old dip in the jet stream here in the east, bringing very, very cold Arctic air down into the eastern half of the nation. And then, of course, we've got the flaky weather along the mid and upper Atlantic coast. And here's what's happening today in terms of the outlook. Generally clear skies across the southern tier of states. As I said, some wet weather here in the northwest. Just spotty precip, a little snow over the higher elevations. Still some light flurry activity here in the extreme northern plains. And here's your messy weather right here. Near blizzard conditions along the coastal areas of southern New England down to the mid-Atlantic to Virginia. Heavy snow accumulation, 2 inches to 10 inches for much of the coastal area. That's a quick look at the national weather picture, and here's what's happening in your hometown area.
Good morning, everyone. This is Brad Edwards from the 5 TV Forecast Center, and it looks like our cold spell is over for a while. It'll be mostly cloudy this morning with decreasing clouds this afternoon, but the good news is it'll be warmer with a high of 30 degrees, south winds 5 to 10 miles per hour.
We'll have more on the big snowstorm in the next half hour. Charlie?
Thank you, Spencer. 10 minutes after now. The latest wave of kidnappings in Beirut has created new pressures and raised a lot of questions, both for the American and the West German governments. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger is with me this morning. Dr. Kissinger, you're nice to get up so early.
Good to be here.
Nice to have you with us. What should we do now, or should we do anything to win the release of the current hostages?
Well, I don't think we can do anything immediately to win the release of the hostages. I think the first thing we have to do is to get our anti-terrorist policy back to the first principles that had been announced by the Secretary of State over a year ago, which I think are correct and wise. There cannot be any negotiation, because once you open negotiations, you make clear that there is some price you're willing to pay. And painful as this is for the families of the immediate hostages, it is the only protection for potential future hostages, as there are tens of thousands excuse me, of Americans around the world at any one moment. Secondly, it has to be made clear that if any harm comes to these Americans, there will be very tough retaliation against both the terrorists and the countries that have been supporting them directly or indirectly.
The number one...
how to implement that is
the problem. That's right. The number one tenet you mentioned, don't negotiate. That obviously was the stated purpose of the administration and stated intent of the administration for a long time. We now find out that for 15 months we've not only been negotiating, but doing business with them. Can you reestablish credibility at this point?
Well, I think we have to face the fact that compassion, emotion ran away with the administration on behalf of the first 5 hostages. Their experience should have made clear that this was a human, understandable, but nevertheless serious mistake, and that the policy that they initiated originally and that was carried out through the bombing of Libya was the correct one, painful as it is, difficult as it is. And after all, they know what the correct policy is. They just got torn. It will be hard to reestablish credibility, but it can be done.
It can be done. If you say don't negotiate, then you don't think Terry Wade ought to be there now?
Well, I'm torn. Terry Wade is not an American official. He doesn't speak for the United States. He speaks entirely for himself. If he really speaks entirely for himself, I would be less tough about that. But I must tell you frankly, and I don't know whether I would have the emotional strength to carry it through, so it's easy for me to say on the outside. Intellectually, the correct policy is to tell the kidnappers, you've got them now what are you going to do with them? By devaluing the hostages, you make it less likely that they're being taken. But Wade, I have, as long as he's really on his own, but I would tend to discourage any negotiation, certainly any governmental negotiation.
All right, Wade may be an uncertain case, but certainly you would disapprove of the West German ambassador who was there this weekend talking to the spiritual leader of Hezbollah, the party.
Big mistake.
Big mistake for him to do that.
I think so.
What would be the consequences if the West Germans now made a deal, since they hold Mr. Hamadeh, if they made a deal, they're hostages for Hamadeh?
One has to understand what these terrorists are attempting to do. They have an immediate issue. But then they have a long-term issue. What they're trying to prove is to all the moderates in the area is that the West cannot protect its own citizens. Therefore, how can it possibly protect the people that are trying to work with the West in the area? And the result of it will be that the terrorists, the groups that carry out the terrorism will be encouraged because they will know that they can get their people back. The West, here are great industrial powers that are being blackmailed by semi-criminal gangs of small numbers whose locations are more or less known, against which that are protected mostly by our inhibitions. And I think it would be very sad.
If there are now threats to kill some of the hostages, if any of those threats are made good, you think, given what you mentioned earlier, that there ought to be an immediate retaliation, some kind of retaliation? And against whom?
Keeping in mind that I do not have the details.
Right.
And that a president and secretary of state would have to give instructions to their bureaucracy who do know the details to find targets. I just cannot believe that in a city like Beirut, where armed gangs are running around and where every journalist seems to be able to find somebody to talk to, that we cannot locate the headquarters of some of these terrorist groups. Secondly, we know by now that in addition to Libya, Syria and Iran are backing these terrorists. Iran has offered to get them released in return for certain things. So I believe that in due course, after going through economic and other pressures, we should even use military force. We can use it in the Bekaa Valley, where we know that terrorist groups are located in Lebanon, and maybe also some Syrian forces. And I would be sorely tempted to use it against the military concentrations of Iran along the Iraq border, because we know that an Iranian victory over Iraq would be violently against Western interests. It might drive up oil prices, it would start a wave of fundamentalism. And if the Iranians are not ready to help us get our hostages released, having announced that they can do it and having made demands, I think they ought to pay the price.
Henry Kissinger, thank you for being with us this morning. Now, 16 minutes after, the Reverend Benjamin Weir wants a hostage himself. He'll be with us after this.
Armor remembers.
Remember when you lost your first tooth? You thought you'd really miss it. But when it turned into a quarter, you didn't miss it so much. Well, today there's Armor's lower salt meats and cheeses, and you're afraid you'll miss that salt. Same great Armor taste, lower salt and all. Now that's something you can sink your teeth into. Lower salt bacon, ham, meats, and cheeses from Armor.
Introducing Command from FMC. It's everything a soybean farmer has ever wanted to do to a weed in one convenient package. The only soybean herbicide that kills grasses as well as the major broadleaf weeds without damaging the crop. And it controls weeds all season long because Command is...
Tonight on 5 TV's Iowa News Tonight, Joan Merrigan will report on her day spent observing the gubernatorial campaign of Lowell Junkins. We'll put you right in the middle of the Democratic candidate's daily routine and give you a chance to meet the man behind the issues. Continuing coverage of the 86 vote from your TV news station, 5 TV.
We're bringing you your news.
Enter the world of movie magic on the next Entertainment Tonight. First, Hannah and her sister star Max von Sydow talks one-on-one about playing opposite Julie Andrews in the film Duet for One.
You cannot make a movie with just two people talking, because then it will be just a talk show.
Plus, Leonard Maltin explores controversial video versions of your favorite films. Are you really getting the whole picture? Find out when you enter the world.
Watch Entertainment Tonight, weeknights at 11 on 5 TV.
It is now 18 minutes after 7. With us this morning from WEDH-TV in Hartford, Connecticut is the Reverend Benjamin Weir. Reverend Weir is a former hostage. He was held captive in Lebanon for 16 months before his release in September of 1985. And Reverend Weir, good morning.
Good morning.
You just heard Dr. Kissinger speak. He said no negotiations, and in fact, if any harm comes to the hostages, that there should be serious consequences, including military action. And he was quite specific about where this should take place, places in the Bekaa Valley, perhaps along the Iraq border. What is your reaction to military consequences?
I think it's a very serious mistake. I believe that we have to try to use every legitimate means at our disposal, but I think military action is going to be self-defeating and lead to more extremism rather than a solution and support of the moderates in the Middle East.
All right, you have suggested several other ways we could go. You've condemned the Reagan administration's arms deals. On Saturday, you had a press conference, and you talked about several things, including recognizing the PLO. What are some of the things you would suggest that we might do?
I think a very important part of American policy in the Middle East is to support an international peace conference that will enable a discussion between representatives of the Palestinian people, which will mean some moderate leadership in the PLO, as well as with Israelis and other parties concerned with the dispute. I think that is extremely important if we're wanting to get to some of the nub of the serious questions having to do with difficulties in the Middle East.
You said that the Iran arms deal really undermined our credibility over there, and yet at the same time, though, if we are to change our policies and become more flexible, would this not also undermine us in that region as well as around the world?
I think we have to have a very serious review of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and try to see what are some of the underlying factors that have led to moderates being discouraged with our policies and really fomenting support for extremism in the Middle East. It seems to me that's a very fundamental thing that we have to try to understand why it is that there's so much dissatisfaction and discredibility of U.S. policy in the Middle East today.
Of course, while all this is going on, Terry Waite is over there. You said on Saturday that you believed he could in fact be a hostage himself. Do you feel that that's the case at this time?
I understand he has sent out word that he is safe, but undoubtedly there is risk to him. He knows that. He's willing to take that risk in order to try to complete his mission, and I admire him for his courage.
The Americans taken hostage over the weekend have, of course, been there after repeated warnings from the United States that they should leave. And, of course, this has been the case with many of the hostages in the past. What makes Americans stay over there?
There are very few Americans in Beirut, Lebanon today. The ones who were there, though I do not know them personally, I understand were there because they felt they had an important task to do and that they were reasonably secure on the campus of Beirut University College.
Reverend Weir, you say that we should be more flexible, and that's really the basis, that we have to be more flexible. Many people, when they hear you say flexible, they hear soften. And they say that that is bad for us to soften our policy. Why are they wrong?
Well, I certainly don't condone hostage-taking or violent acts, but I think we must also try to understand what are some of the fundamental issues and not simply think of the Middle East as an area of contest between ourselves and Soviet Russia, or simply an area in which we're trying to control oil supplies or have a strong military presence. I think we have to deal with some of the very fundamental issues, and that's the kind of flexibility I'm talking about.
And as we all talk theory, what if in fact they do, because they did say over the weekend that they might take the life of one of the hostages. If they do take the life of one of the hostages, what is the immediate response?
Well, I think it's a question we'll have to face as that comes. I would hope that we could still avoid military intervention and try to find a way in order to alleviate the pressure on those men, and therefore I think that is absolutely necessary, why we must have some kind of negotiation and intervention.
Who can give me the best new car deal?
I mean everything. Trade-in, sticker price, the works.
Oh, the Crescent Man can at Crescent Chevrolet. What you're looking for, more for your money, more for you to drive. The Crescent Man makes it all come alive. The Crescent Man can at Crescent Chevrolet.
17th and Ingersoll. Where do you go for mobility equipment? Ostomy supplies, respiratory products, exercise equipment. Where do you go? To the name you know, Hammer. For all your home health care needs, it's Hammer Medical Supply. And Hammer bills Medicare and insurance companies for you, too. Hammer Medical Supply, your complete home health care headquarters. Hammer, Des Moines, Newton, and Oskaloosa.